Viewers, it's Evelyn coming to you live from the camera store. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for another virtual event. We have something special with a very special guest. And tonight we're going to be talking about getting creative with the latest video features with the one and only Jordan Drake.
Hey!
And Jordan is a videographer and editor, co-host of DP Review TV, the YouTube series with Chris Nichols, who I know is in the audience right now. And before that, he was also the co-creator of this very YouTube channel, TCSTV, and also an award-winning cinematographer. But most importantly, my baby daddy has been man of the hour, which if you didn't know that, now you do.
You led with baby daddy.
Well, it's most important. But before we get into things, I want to take a second and just thank Sony Canada for bringing us together. And we were talking about how weird is it that we've never actually appeared on camera together.
Yeah, I mean, you've shot episodes of DP Review TV, and I've shot some TCSTV, but we've never been in the same frame. This is magical.
Yeah, so we needed Sony to help us do that, apparently.
They're a real matchmaker.
Yeah, but of course, Sony doesn't sponsor you personally.
No, that would be...
That'd be very awkward.
Ethically, a little bit of a gray area as a camera reviewer, yes.
Yes, but of course we want to thank them for making us do this and supporting our TCSTV live dream team tonight. Of course, we have Drew and Gary behind the scenes working all their magic to make sure that this all goes very smoothly. And later, you're going to be able to see them as Jordan demonstrates some nice POV stuff. So you'll be able to see the TCSTV live dream team, another first on our channel tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we did a live show back a long time ago, and this is so much more elegant, and honestly,
it's pretty nice.
The show today is going to be much more structured than how things were back there. I'm going to enjoy doing it probably more than those old shows as well. This is great.
It's going to be good. But what I love most about doing the live streams, of course, is being able to interact with all of you guys. So make sure that you comment, ask questions. I mean, we have Jordan here. He has a ton of knowledge, and so you can all experience what I get to experience like every day and like just pick his brain and learn everything that he has to say about video stuff. We also have Anthony in the chat tonight too. He's from Sony Canada. He's our awesome local rep. So if you have any Sony related questions, feel free to hit him up there. And if you've registered for the event, we've also arranged with him that you can get a special offer in your email. Ooh. And so definitely check your inbox if you've registered. If you didn't and you want to get in on that, my email address is evelyn@thecamerastore.com and I'll add you to the list.
Yeah, and I have a presentation here, but the appeal of going live for me is a chance to interact with a lot of you in real time. So please post those things. Eva's going to be keeping an eye on the chat, and she's definitely going to let me, or fill me in on everything as we go. So what am I talking about today?
Creative video.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do is, so often I'm asked to explain what all of the endless, acronyms and features for video cameras are. Like, guys, you're not going to believe this has 4K/120p XAVC HS. You should be really excited about that. And I could just rattle off some specs and what that feature is. Yeah, let's have more fun than that. I want to talk about some of these new features that we're starting to see in cameras, as opposed to just oh, that is a very good spec. Like, how can you actually use it to create more creative video? That's kind of a challenge that I give myself whenever I'm shooting a video project or an episode of DP Review TV, is I want to do one fun thing with the camera or with the edit or something like that. And you can use a lot of these features to demonstrate that. So let's kick things off with something, I mean, it makes a lot of sense with Sony presenting this. One thing they do very well is autofocus. And for the longest time, whenever I was doing video classes, anything like that, I'm like, if you're trying to convey emotion to the audience, then you have to be manually pulling your focus, right? You've got to master that technique. But then, we get something like the A7S III come out that shot this, and you want to just kick over to my laptop there, guys? Awesome. Yeah, this is just a random test we did when the camera first arrived. And I mean, it's pretty seamless. I don't think I could pull focus as fast or accurately as that. But I still have a real issue with that. The focus is so snappy on all of these cameras that fast autofocus is always the best thing with stills. We're never I'd really like to slow down that focus. But the speed of focus is actually a really important thing in terms of telling a narrative. So here's where I'm going to get my lovely models to help me out here. Guys, would you be able to switch over to the other camera there?
Models.
And this is, I mean, Gary and Drew were doing this back in my old TCS days, so this is a reunion as well. So what I've done here, we're over on the camera, is we've got the autofocus set up on its default mode, and as I tap to pull focus between.
Look at the camera, Gary.
Yeah, look at there. Yes, the side eye is perfect. And you can see it's incredibly fast. It's quite smooth. But the concern is, in filmmaking, when we quickly pull focus from one thing to another, it's because it's exciting or terrifying, or it's something that really demands your attention. And it's not how most of life is. We don't want to quickly, like, all right, look at me, and then I want you to turn and look at Drew now. Oh man, it looks like he's up to something. So one thing,
Usually is up to
even though
something.
we're really starting to rely, and I'm even starting to rely more on autofocus, hopefully, can they see the menu here, Gary? Is that coming through, or is it still a clean video feed?
Still clean video.
Clean video? Okay. So I'm just jumping into the Sony menus right now, and I'm switching my focus mode over to a slow AF transition speed. Not the slowest, because it takes weeks, but a slower one. And what you'll find when we do a focus pull there, this is more what we're used to seeing whenever we watch like regular TV, filmmaking, it's that very kind of subtle, more calm, and just a focus pull that draws a lot less attention to itself. So I think it's great that we're seeing all these autofocus features in the camera, but you do still really want to hold their hand a lot, is something that I would recommend. And I always set up the autofocus responsiveness speed to be something that's like a quick function or something so I can access it. But anybody who's listening, camera manufacturers, hey, Sony people are in the chat, I would love the ability, hey, switch the camera over to autofocus. You're not using that manual focus ring anymore. Make that manual focus ring be your focus transition speed.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Like that, that idea is free. You can have it.
You can have that one.
So yeah, it's just something to remember when you're setting up those things, what kind of scene are you trying to convey. Now, if you're following a moving subject, there I would say just set it to the fastest possible speed, because you don't want it to lose your subject. But if you are shifting focus from one subject to another, it's something you really do want to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so should we, look at your computer screen again, because you have some more examples.
Yeah, so I also want to talk about that 24p, 30p, 60p. Anything with p, I mean, it means progressive video, but it's not like we've had interlaced video in, I don't know, like
well,
before
probably,
we got together.
Well, yeah, I mean, we still were talking about interlaced video, I think, when we both were working
like
here
at the very
together.
start. But I mean, it's largely not something we have to worry about. But 24p, 24 frames per second. Any of those.
And we're streaming right now at 24 frames per second, right? TCSTV live Dream Team?
Yeah, so that should work really well for the demonstration. I usually shoot at 24 frames per second. It's the speed that movies have been shot at forever. So I always say, like, you know, back in the day, we would watch TV movies, and, you know, you're watching it on like a crummy little CRT tube display, but you could always tell when a movie was on. You know, and it wasn't just like, oh, the acting is better or something like that. There is a different motion cadence to films, and our eyes detect that and say, like, oh, that's cinematic, for sure.
Yeah, and you like that.
I do. So, you know, you're 24 frames per second if we're kicked over on that. This is from a short film that I shot with Levi Hallwell, the last film project that I worked on. And yeah, it does immediately have that. We're watching a movie is the look that we get. But the tricky thing is we're streaming at 24 frames per second, so actually demonstrating in real time what other frame rates look like is difficult. So I need you to be my assistant, all right?
Okay.
Because you're going to be seeing these other frame rates looking kind of choppy and weird, so you will be the translator.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what I'm seeing, because it won't look the same to you guys, because we're live streaming at 24p.
All right, Ev.
Yeah.
Here's 30p, playing back at 30p. So this is the frame rate that before was like your television frame rate.
Yeah,
right?
it looks more kind of quote unquote natural, real life.
Yeah, and it's really become the YouTube look. If someone's not specifically chasing that, you know, filmmaking kind of look to it. I mean, this is the great thing now is we can choose this variety of frame rates. But, you know, for so much stuff, like back when I was doing Camera Store TV, for the longest time that was 30 frames per second. It just seemed like the right frame rate for that kind of content. But now we're starting to see cameras that are letting you shoot at 60p. And once we jump over there, again, they're not going to see this effect through the stream right now. How does that look?
It doesn't have any motion to it. Like the way his hands are moving is just very...
It's like looking through a window, kind of, is what I like to say, right?
Yeah, hyper real.
Yeah, I mean, it should, by all rights, it's the most realistic. It's very close to what our eyes should see. But it's funny, so many people see that and they just immediately reject it. And it has a ton of uses, like for sports and things like that. Works great. I would love to see, you know, like a planet Earth or something like that that was captured completely top to bottom, shot and displayed at 60 frames per second. That could be really cool. It's great for reality. But yeah, if you're using it for storytelling or filming, I mean, they've tried doing high frame rate movies and people don't like the look of them.
Yeah, and I seem to remember you being in pubs and actually changing the look on TV.
There's this motion smoothing where it's trying to build intermediate frames to make movies look more like soap operas, and it drives me absolutely. So yes, I will.
Yeah.
If you invite me to your house, I will turn your motion smoothing
Or if
off.
you're like in a pub in a public place,
then I will ask the bartender for the remote control and turn the motions. It's a delight, right?
Yes, it's always
It's not irritating, right?
No.
When you're waiting to like grab a drink, if I want to go deal with that first.
Relax. You can't relax until you change the hyper smooth off.
It's a problem.
I know, it's okay.
So why do we have these faster frame rates then? It's for slow motion, right?
Yeah.
So we shoot it at 60 frames and we play it back at 30, and it's at half speed, or if we put it into 24, it's playing back at 40.
Yeah, like we often shoot a lot of our coverage in 60p, right, Drew? Because then we have the option to slow it down, and it, you know, for coverage shots, it really doesn't matter too much.
Right. Like I went back and I was like, what was the first real slow-mo? And it was 8 years ago.
Oh yeah.
For the camera store.
It's baby Chris.
That I shot this on a Sony FS700, and at the time it was just like, it's a big cinema camera, and you know, I was blown away by that. But now we have like this is from a Sony A7S III, and it gives you 1080 240, which is sharper than that old camera. But also we're getting like autofocus when we're doing that, which just makes it all so much more usable, you know. And again, we've got all of these high frame rates played back at 24 frames per second. I don't know why I included this clip.
I think it's fantastic. Because it's fun, Jordan.
Yeah, so I mean, there's 240 frames per second. That's 1/10 speed that's playing back. And yeah, it is so much fun to play with. But I do find now that we're seeing these cameras coming out with 4K 120 and 1080 240, and I had this affliction as well. I would automatically be like, I want to go to my slowest slow motion whenever I'm shooting it. But you really want to use different subjects, different frame rates for different kinds of subjects, I find. So, you know, if it's people moving or running or something like that, 60 frames per second is generally what I will still go to keep it from being so slow that a movement really drags out.
Right.
Where you want those faster frame rates, I find, is like water or the snow example.
Like
that we
super
had
action, especially like when you have stuff flying.
I'm going to break something. Like then, yeah absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really overused where you have a lot of people who are shooting extreme slow motion of something. You know, the dude running at 240 frames per second. It's like Yeah, but I mean, of course, you're going to get a new camera, something like that, and you're going to want to push it to the max and be able to like experiment with those and make a use case for it. Yeah.
So.
But it's a creative choice as well. It's not always, you know, the slowest possible frame rate is your best option, right? So you just want to know when to use these frame rates with which kind of situations.
Yeah. Ember Sky Media says birds. That's another good.
Birds are yeah, we had a 4K 120 example there. You don't know when they're going to take off, and you just want to get those little bits of movement.
Well, and it's crazy because you can really see, you know, with different animals and birds in particular, just how their bodies move. Like, it's so fascinating seeing it when you can actually see like the expanse of their wings, which your brain normally, you know, just blurs that completely.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's
you
for
discover
finding
new
those
things.
really little details. But yeah, I would recommend not shooting everything at 4K 120 because I went down that road, and now honestly I shoot a lot of our slow-mo because we output at 24. I shoot at a 48, which was a really common slow motion, again going back to filmmaking, and I love the look of that as well. My buddy Ted Forbes likes to shoot 30 and slow it down to 24 frames per second because it looks like when the 5D Mark II first came out and everybody was shooting 30p trying to make it look cinematic. So slow it down. So it's like the early, it's like the 2010 look is, shoot 30, slow it down to 24.
He still does it now?
I think so. Yeah, I was talking with him about it well before everything stopped.
Yeah,
and
you
went
guys should
bad.
look up Ted Forbes' channel.
Yeah, he does great work.
What's it called again?
Art of Photography.
Art of Photography. I'll
Yeah.
put a link in.
Friend of the family. But also, one thing that I do really like is if you have small movements in the frame, shooting them in slow motion can give you a very different kind of vibe as well. We got sound on, boys?
The hunt, the pursuit. Finally, a tool exists that can help me realize my creative brilliance. No more screens. The human eye, photons traveling across the galaxy to be harnessed by my will. And yet, even more important than my vision is how I look. Look at this understated camera bag and my trendy leather strap. Everybody must be looking at me and just saying, wow, that guy's got it figured out. I mean, where is everybody? There's nobody around here? Nobody?
And we're back to a standard frame right there. And I really think it's so much fun to play with very small movements, shoot them slow, and immediately you get way more drama in the shot, which can be a lot of fun to play with. I mean, I find it more fun to make fun of, you know, every advertisement out there is using this technique. You know, just have someone look at a horizon, turn their head at 60 frames per second, slowed down to 24. But yeah, you can definitely use it for, you know, parody of that really overdone technique as well.
Definitely. Well, before we get on to your next topic related to this, I just want to give you guys a little mention that if you have questions and you're not logged into YouTube, you can also email me, evelyn@thecamerastore.com. And I have one.
Oh.
Would you be willing to take a question?
I'll take a question.
Okay, I got an email question here from Tom. And he's in Austin, Texas, actually. And he said, after messing around with similar projects with iPhones and camcorders, I'm getting ready to shoot my first serious video with a more advanced setup, a Sony a7S III with a Sigma 24-70. The project is a set of training videos for work and will mostly resemble a TCSTV review video, talking head mostly outside with B-roll and some instructional shots using tech equipment, phones, laptops, etc.
I have experience with this type of shoot.
You do, this is your game. The 24-70 is great, and I imagine I will use it for most things. My question is, what is the next 1 to 2 E-mount lenses I should look at to provide a variety of different types of shots? It's a good question. So lens recommendations for what you do.
Yeah, for the kind of stuff that I do really like to have like a short telephoto. I think it's like an 85 millimeter or 105. I mean, the Sony 85 millimeter 1.8 is a brilliant lens. Even if you can swing the 135 1.8, that is maybe my favorite lens in the world right now. I adore that
Drew
lens.
is nodding too. He is in agreement.
Yeah, really nice options. But you do definitely want to fill out the wide angle a little bit. Like I'd like to work a little bit wider than 24.
Anamorphic. Someone just said anamorphic.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
come
Sony,
on.
let's get some D-squeeze in that A7S III so we can monitor our anamorphic while we're shooting it. I mean, yeah, if you can do anamorphic, that's tons of fun. But yeah, I really like to have an 85, and I do like to have a wider lens, whether it's a wide prime. I really like 20 mils. I've gotten used to shooting that a lot, especially for walk-in talks. Yeah, something like Tamron 1728 is a great lens. The Sony, I mean, on their wide angle, that new 1635 power zoom looks like you get that extra servo action. So that'll give you a different look that you don't have already with your 24-70. You can get that very smooth punch in, and I was very impressed with that. That was one of my favorite lenses last year. So yeah, if you want to keep it like light, reasonable, let's say 1635 PZ and an 85 1.8, and you got a stew going.
Yeah, and I mean, depending on where you are, well, you said you're in Austin, Texas. I'm not sure exactly which stores you have, but of course, anywhere local, we carry a huge selection of Sony lenses that you can rent. So that's a good way to try it out, do a project, see how you like it, and a lot of places have try before you buy too, so you can rent for free.
Yeah, and the best thing about having a 24-70 already is just find which end of the zoom you're leaning up against all the time. If you're constantly pushing at 24, then you know that wide angle is going to be your best friend. But if you're shooting a lot at 70, which I've found I do quite a bit, then yeah, look at something a little bit longer.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions, put them in the chat, send me an email, and we'll get to them as we go.
Yeah. All right, here's a major development that I think is actually quite exciting. So,
Yes.
you know, I mentioned that FS700 camera, and so many new cameras when they're coming out. Like the Sonys have the S and Q mode on the dial. You know, Panasonic's have
Even though they're entry.
HFR. Yeah, they've got that, and they'll shoot slow motion, but you pick what playback rate you want them at. So it'll like shoot, you know, 240 and play it back at 24 frames per second, 1/10 speed. The drawback to doing that is you don't get any audio captured with it. And for the longest time, I thought the same way as the manufacturers, like, if your audio's slowed down that much, it's going to sound like garbage. But now we're starting to see cameras that are shooting those high frame rates and recording audio at the same time, which I find actually extremely useful. So, you know, here's a simple example. I really love this for family stuff because I'll just roll slow motion and then find these little moments that I want to, you know, whether I speed ramp it or something like that. But the thing here is we've got a lot of the sound playing, and that doesn't actually sync with what we're watching played back.
No.
You know, like these waves might be playing at half speed, even though we captured it and it's playing back at 1/10 speed.
Yeah.
You can really just have that as an audio option that you can pull from all the time.
Yeah, and I love this actually, the stuff with the waves and the ocean, and us playing with the boogie boards and stuff. I mean, it was so great when we cut together a little home video from our trip, and even though we were mixing it with sound, it was nice to have some of those like natural ambient sounds to go with it, even during the crazy slow motion stuff, because it just puts you there. And you know, I think a lot of times we just crave those like natural sounds.
And a lot of the time too, there'd be a moment where I was using the slow motion camera and someone would say something cool, and I might not use that in the, you know, within that slow motion clip, but I've got it now, so I could throw it anywhere else in the video, use it as a cutaway. I just love that they're starting to move towards that. But again, I do have an issue with this.
There's always something.
That's why I review cameras.
Yes, of course.
If you have a camera that records in this way, it's really cool that you can capture it with the sound, but when you play it back, it plays back in real time. So your sound doesn't seem all weird. But I think it's such a simple fix. In playback mode, just give me the option to, hey, play it back, but at 24 or 30 or 60 frames per second. So, because I do really, when I record a slow motion clip, want to make sure it actually worked, especially for like product shots or wildlife. You want to make sure you got that moment before you go home, slow down the clip afterwards and find out like, oh, that actually didn't work.
And if you're shooting something professionally, like an athlete, and they want to be able to see what it looked like right away.
Yeah, show me that slow-mo.
Or like if you have a 7-year-old or a 2.5-year-old and they're like, can I see that? Can I see that immediately?
I have no experience with that situation.
You're very helpful.
Yeah, but that is something I would love to see. But again, these are the things we're starting to see in cameras, and they actually have a real useful function when you're out shooting. All right, I'm going to go over to my other camera here really quick.
Okay, you're going to leave me?
I'm sorry, but duty calls. I'll be back. So let's talk about picture profiles with our good friend Gary here. Oh, look at us slowly pulling focus there. So
He looks so impressed.
He looks thrilled. So many people, I think, really look at video profiles in terms of Drew as, not childish at all. All right, let's jump in and start flipping through some picture profiles. So by default, your camera is going to shoot something that's designed to look like a JPEG. And that's what we're seeing right here. What your photos will capture, it's very punchy, but you can't do much to it. And then most people, if they get a little bit more advanced with video, they're going to jump over and start looking at log recording. So bear with me 1 second here. Perfect.
You drink my water, right?
So yeah, here we jump over to S-Log3, one of your classic video profiles, which is very, very flat and also very usable now that we're starting to get cameras that can record 10-bit. This gives you a lot of flexibility in the post, but I find it actually a real issue to light. And these images are getting so flat at this point. It's tough to know what your contrast is actually going to look like, how your skin tones look. You can have baked in LUTs, but it just complicates things a little bit, and it might not look exactly like how it does on your computer. So I really like that we're starting to see these hybrid profiles popping up. And Sony has their new S-Cinetone right there. And you can see it's a more cinematic looking image than what we had before, but it's still something that you can edit a fair amount. And we're seeing this from a lot of the camera manufacturers. Fujifilm has their Eterna profile. Canon's got their wide DR that I love, which is not on their photo cameras for some reason. Panasonic has like 709. This is a really good intermediate thing if you don't want all the hassle of working with log, or especially looking at log while you're shooting, but still want to maintain a little bit of flexibility. And I do think it's something that was a little bit overdue and really, really useful. And I'm back.
And you're back. And we're back. No, that's good. I'm glad you demonstrated that.
I said really quick in the thing.
Really quick.
So,
Really quick.
yeah.
Yeah, and a Cinetone looks pretty nice. I would agree.
Nikon is flat. Which other ones did I miss? OM has flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're starting to see these, and they're extremely useful, I think. So another thing that gets hyped up a lot is...
Oh, this topic. Okay. Here we go. Hold on to your seats.
You've heard this before.
Yes.
High ISO.
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 A little prelude before I play this video. I mean, we see it all the time now on the press release, like incredibly clean images up to 256,000 ISO. And then you look at images from that and they're terrible. And for the longest time, I was of the mindset that, like, if you need extremely high ISOs, it means the light is so bad that the video is not
You're like,
worth
make
recording.
the light better.
Yeah, it's not worth recording the video or taking the photo. But I've come around a little bit, I gotta say. So I'm gonna go back to the first movie that I did with Levi Hallwell, one of my favorite people, director I've worked with before. I was director of photography on a film called Metanoia, which was all shot at night. And we went out with an FS7, like a cinema camera. And we had an A7S, the original.
Right.
With it, and we were like, well,
you weren't planning to shoot with that very much.
No, I was like, this will be a nice gimbal camera for us. We can get some cutaways, things like that. But here's a few snippets from that movie, and so much of this we could not have done with a conventional cinema camera, and so much of this is available light. You can see the clouds. Even though we're shooting at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's just moonlight illuminating them. So this is a lit shot, but I had one big key outside the barn illuminating that. And that shot there, that is actual aurora. That's not a visual effects shot. So a lot of those were shot at, 12,800, 25,600 when we were out doing it. And it got us shots that we could not have gotten any other way. And I think the A7S is a fun camera to talk about historically, because when that came out, everybody lost their minds. Like, we've reached the next level of low light performance, and it's performance. And it's because they kept it at that 12 megapixels, and that's going to make it just a killer low light camera. What we didn't know, and we actually found out after the fact, is it wasn't. Well, I mean, yes, it's nice that it's lower megapixels when you get to extremely high ISOs, but the big difference there is it was actually the first camera that we saw with a dual gain sensor. And we're seeing these more and more and more in all of the cameras that are coming out, especially like anything with a Sony sensor in it. And now we're actually getting the option where they're like, hey, here's your two sensitivities. They're helping you out with it a little bit. And that's why it was so impressive. And what's cool is back then we thought it was going to be a compromise. If you want really good low light, you have to buy the low megapixel camera. But that's actually not so much the case. Now that we've got all of these dual gain cameras out there, you're going to get pretty similar high ISO performance with like a Sony A7 IV to what you get with an A7S III, until you get like to crazy, like in the 100,000 ISO.
Yeah, so what kind of ISO range were you shooting with this project?
So this stuff was, 6,400 to 25,600, all of the things that I just showed on the screen.
Pretty high, but not necessarily the extreme.
But that's what's cool, is now that's doable. You don't have to buy a specific low megapixel camera. Now, I think the A7S III, the FX3, they all have their niche because there's lower pixels. They have quite minimal rolling shutter, and that's why we get those super slow, super slow motion on it. We can handhold those quite a bit. But if you want,
and the scan rate is just making it to
it just reads out very fast.
Keeps it cool.
Yeah. But if you do grab something because you want it to be a good photo and video camera, don't feel like you're making an enormous sacrifice in high ISO performance to grab that.
We got something higher resolution.
Yeah, and we've shot the A7S III out against some 24 megapixel cameras that are very similar. So, yeah, little peace of mind there.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. What's your best recommendation for a camera under $500 that can shoot 4K?
Oh, under 5 is tricky.
Let's do under 1,000. I know it's not quite what you asked, but I think that just gives a little bit more range.
Under 5. Your phone actually does a really good job. It's true. Under $1,000, I do think the video from a Sony a6100 is very good. Fujifilm XS10, I think is pretty close. It depends which region you're in.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to that, but really nice video coming off those as well. Those would probably be my top picks.
Yeah, I mean the A6000 series of cameras is one of our top selling cameras, period, just because of that flexibility for content creators.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Those would probably be my top picks. But yeah, I do kind of feel like you have to hit around that $1,000 mark to make it worthwhile. You know, actually, for a smaller one, I do like that Sony ZV-1. The one with the zoom lens, the F, not so much, but yeah, that's a really nice option as well if you don't want the hassle of having to change lenses out. And I think it's gone on sale actually this year too. I don't know. I'm in a camera store. I can check that, but moving along.
We'll put a link in. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said you had a couple questions.
We'll do some more later.
Okay, cool. The other thing that's really great with all of the mirrorless cameras that have come out in the last little while is because they're a short flange, you can adapt any older lenses to it. Like you can't adapt, with a few exceptions, a mirrorless lens to a different mirrorless system. But if you want to use older DSLR lenses, or in my case, a lot cinema lenses, all of those, you'll be able to drop them right onto the bodies. And I think that really opens up a lot of creative freedom. Like we're seeing incredible lenses coming out for these mirrorless cameras. Like it's becoming really tough to do a lens review because I'm like, yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
You know, right?
Yeah. What do you say about this? It's great.
But sometimes, you know, there is a look to a slightly, like honestly, a flawed image, something we might give a lens a bad review for. I remember we were bickering about the Laowa 35mm 0.95 because technically we're like, you know, it's got a lot of vignetting. It's not very sharp, but I love.
So
that's one of
pretty.
my favorite. I shot like a bunch of family photos with it and loved the image from it.
Because it's like that nostalgic kind of a little bit flawed, a little bit.
Yeah, it's just a unique look. It can be like nostalgic or whatever. And in the case of that film I mentioned before, A Walk Down to Water, we primarily shot it with a set of Sony Cine Alta prime lenses, which are really nice lenses, very clean, very consistent. But we have a scene in the movie where we have a character enter something where it's a little, I'll spoil it, there's a dead person in the room. So we wanted it to have a little different feel from the other locations. So talking to the director, Levi Hallwell, we looked at quite a few lenses, and actually we loved the look of Chris Nichols, who's in the chat there, had a set of old Nikkor AI lenses like from the 70s. Popped those on, and I mean, they were a huge pain. They focused the wrong way, but being able to just pop those on a body and get a unique look. And here we can see, jumping over there, we get that really nice light blooming, like a loss of contrast when we have a bright light source in it, which on a modern lens we'd say like, hey, this thing has almost no flare. That's a really good thing. But in this case, it gave us a really unique look that we couldn't have gotten before. And then
I don't know if is it playing? Yeah.
It's playing,
okay?
yeah.
Okay.
And then when we took that later in the movie to when he makes a call home, that we want to also have a very different feel from the rest of the movie, using that same set. And you can see like a really aggressive vignette in it, and it's not sharp. But he's talking to his family back home. We wanted it to feel nostalgic.
The distance.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that's something to remember when you know, like we just had someone ask which lenses to look at, and I mentioned a bunch of really good modern options.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe a good one to throw in there is grab an old $100 used 50 mil.
Yeah.
Get like a big old vignette on it and see if that inspires you creatively as well.
Well, and there's so many things on the market now, like accessories that even you can play around with your super sharp lens. You know, we have the lens baby stuff where you can put stuff in front of it.
Put some gunk on that lens. You know, some of those shots at the beach, not ones that I demonstrated here, but we actually put a pane of glass slightly off axes onto the lens and then sprayed some glycerin or water onto it, just so that it looks a little like looking through a car window. There's a photographer, I bet we have some of his books here, Todd Hito, that we were very inspired by when we were planning the movie to get that exact same look. So, you know, don't underestimate some of those, you know, adaptability on these things.
Okay, well, let's get to a few of these questions that I'm sure are burning with you guys, but we'll go into a few. So the first one I have here is when we're talking about high ISO, the video low light versus sharpness. I prefer the sharpness with the A7 III over the A7S series.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that is something to get that very fast readout. They put less pixels in the A7S III. And if you go up to a camera like, the A7 III or now the A7 IV, those cameras are oversampling and in real time compressing that down to a 4K image. They have more pixels than they need. And what happens when you do that is you wind up with sharper video at the end of the day. So that is kind of the toss-up if you're looking at that. I mean, in Sony's Cinema series, they've got the FX3, which is using the same sensor as the A7S III that they just mentioned, or the FX30, which is a smaller sensor, but it's 26 megapixels. You'll actually, in good light, get a sharper image off that FX30. So it's a matter of what's more important to you. You know, it's a lot of trade-offs. Or you could just, you know, everyone should just buy like a camera with a stacked sensor, like an A1. Or, you know,
Gary's like,
fix
call Gary.
all of your problems right there. But unfortunately, those are still very expensive to get access to in a lot of cameras. So it's, I mean, the future is really detailed images with very low rolling shutter, but we're in kind of a transitionary stage right now. So yeah, I think they're both good options, but yeah, it's sharpness versus that fast readout, doing that slow-mo stuff.
Slow-mo.
Yeah.
Okay, question here from Robert. What's your opinion about using Topaz Video AI for upscaling video, removing noise or smoothing slow motion frame rates in video?
Yeah, I haven't used that. I've seen some really impressive examples, and I think we're going to start to see a whole pile of things that are just using machine learning or AI, as everybody wants to call it. But I'm sorry, your editing software is not learning new things all the time. It's referencing a whole bunch of other images and video. Anyway, you have to keep me on track.
I know, I'm sorry. We'll rein it in, Jordan.
But it's incredibly powerful, and it's getting better and better. And if you look at where we were a year ago, even, we were starting to see like some AI sky replacement and stuff.
Yeah.
And now we've got, like AI that we can apply to our video files. And you'll still get, from what I'm hearing, you get some weirdness from time to time, but it's still a technology that's really in its infancy.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happening with still photography right now,
Absolutely.
right? Like, it's insane. Like, if you haven't seen some of the AI stuff that's come out for photography, I mean, you just know that it's going to continue improving in that same direction.
Yeah, well, and our mutual friend, Tyler Stallman, recently posted an example of where he had something in front of a bike wheel that he wanted to replace. So instead of cloning it out, he just popped like bike wheel into an AI, I forget which one he used, and created a bike tile that lined up with his image. And so that's what I'm most, I'm not really excited about, hey, AI, create me a person walking through a beautiful forest for the movie A Walk Down to Water, instead of Levi flying over to Europe to get that footage.
Yeah, using it as a tool.
But using it as a tool to like clean things up, I think it's going to be incredibly powerful that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm keeping an eye on it, but yeah, that is something I would really like to get into and like really test. But I also feel like if I jumped in now, it's at such a transitionary point that anything I said about it will be obsolete in 2 weeks. I'm just waiting for it to mature a little bit more.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Should I do another slide?
Let's do another slide.
All right, I really wanted to get an FX6, which I have reviewed. But you can do some really cool stuff with it because it's one of the very few cameras with an electronic neutral density filter built in.
I'm going to pause you right there for a second. So I think just to clarify one thing, with mirrorless cameras, of course, it's so great. You have so much great video functionality.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of the time you still kind of miss having like a full camera rig because of all the extra video specific add-ons.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you've seen me shooting,
Rigging.
I would say, even if talking about neutral density filters, all the time when I'm out there, Chris can definitely attest to this. I've got a camera under my arm, pulling off, a 3-stop, moving it to a 4-stop filter to get the look that I want. Sony brought out these electronic ND filters where it will actually very smoothly shift the exposure. Here, is that doing the thing? There it goes.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So you can see the effect there. But then using the electronic ND, my aperture is locked, my shutter speed is locked, my sensitivity is locked, and we get these very smooth exposure shifts. And auto ND is a wonderful tool as well.
It's pretty crazy.
Because if I'm shooting inside, a lot of the time, I'll set my camera to the aperture that I want. My shutter speed's fixed because I'm shooting video. That's not part of this talk. But shutter speed, I will have it locked. And then I'm just using the ISO is moving up and down, or the gain, to expose my image as I move between different light sources. But if you're outside, you're shooting at your base ISO, whatever that might be in the camera. I've chosen the aperture that I want. My shutter speed's fixed, so the only way to control my exposure is to screw things on and off, or use like a variable ND filter, but they have their own set of issues. There's color cast, you'll get cross polarization sometimes. Your reflections will change as you change your exposure. There's a lot of limitations to it, where these electronic ND filters are brilliant that way. And one of the coolest things, and the reason I wanted to grab an FX6 before I came in and did this talk, is you can actually do an iris pull with these. So what you do is set the electronic ND to auto and then rack your aperture, go from 1.4 to f16. Your depth of field will change and your exposure won't. And I've seen several demonstrations of this, which I don't have the rights to use in this talk. But it's an incredibly cool, it's rare that we see a completely new creative effect that can be captured in camera, not using visual effects or something like that. So again, going back to camera reviewer Jordan, please find I know space concerns, all kinds of stuff. Electronic ND futures.
In mirrorless cameras.
Prioritize it in mirrorless cameras over whatever you're working on right now.
Yeah. Just drop it all.
Just stop it.
But you have to see, it's getting better for having external ND filters because we have the magnetic system.
Yes,
and
I've been using recently some Maven filters from Michael Andrews, Michael the Maven on YouTube. Magnetic filters that are very color neutral. We're starting to see those. And it definitely speeds things up. There's workarounds with mirrorless cameras.
Yeah, there's lots of different brands that create
but it doesn't negate the fact that
I
want
that. Okay.
Any other questions coming in?
I don't see any at the moment, so you can continue.
Let's roll right through.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite.
This is my favorite thing that I've been having fun with lately. And we're talking about really cool new features that are starting to come through that I'm very excited about, but the one I've been playing with the most lately is the tripod and a little bit of video editing.
This makes young Jordan so happy.
It really, when I'm editing it, I'm just sitting there on my computer giggling, right?
Yeah.
So just last year we were able to introduce this guy,
security and redundancy.
my twin brother Gordon,
the battery on your Ninja
who's
5
a
while
bit
you're
of
in the
a
middle of a clip. Boom, you just
show-off
have a corrupted
DP, very successful in Hollywood, or doing
We've
some
got
intros
ourselves
like
a brand
this,
new
where we've
camera on
got the camera
70 to
locked on a
210 f4.
tripod,
We're going to see how
and
it
we can
stacks
make
up against
Chris
the
dance
competition.
in and out of foreground
But
objects.
don't forget that Canon have just
and
come out
it's
with a brand new
so easy
70
to
to
do
200
if you've got a
f4, and it
locked-off
promises to be
shot.
way better
Just
than the original.
Stack
You know, man,
2
I'm
or 3
surprised. That
video
was actually
clips.
Oh,
quite a
there's
bit of fun. I
Gordon
would
again.
totally
Oh.
come and co-host the show
It
again
wasn't
with you
until
sometime.
this episode came out that it turns out that my wife really likes Gordon, kind
His
of
identity and
I mean-
similar to me in a lot of ways, but just a little more of a dick. So I guess we're going to have to bring him back for that.
You have to bring back Gordon.
Yeah, and the internet does seem to agree a little bit there. But yeah, any time that you can lock the camera off and kind of anticipate those things, or do a time lapse that transitions into a video clip. A lot of the time you're just shooting in still mode when you're doing a time lapse. We did an episode where, roll the camera for a really long time, speed it up in post, and then just have someone walk in and start talking. And it can be a really cool dynamic. And I mean, make sure that you get it right in the first take or you're in trouble. But I do think it's really easy to kind of underestimate some of those, more basic functions.
Chris says he prefers Jordan. Of course he would say that. But no one parties like
I
Gordon.
want you to choose a preference right now.
No comment. Okay, so we have one question here from David. Are we going to be seeing an evolution to curved sensors from the stacked architecture we see camera OEMs implementing, mainly to reduce rolling shutter?
So moving over to curved sensors, where right now a lot of these lenses have spherical elements on them, which just correct the light so it could hit the sensor at a nice flat angle. And a lot of people have been talking about curved sensors. You could have more simple and sharper lens designs potentially with it. I don't know how much, I'm not a sensor designer. I don't know exactly how much of an impact that would have on readout, to be totally honest. I think those are separate issues. And right now, the camera manufacturers are very focused, and this year is such a good example. We're seeing all of these stacked sensor cameras or cameras with very fast readouts all hitting the market at the same time. That seems to be the major area that they're all looking to progress. And it makes sense because you can shoot, electronic silent shutter very well. It's a huge benefit for video. We've actually seen the Fujifilm X-H2S, because that sensor reads out so fast, it can capture video in 14-bit. Right in camera. So we're seeing a lot of benefits that way. The advantage to having a curved sensor is really going to come down to those lens designs, and that means making a whole bunch of new lenses. So I do think there's really very real advantages, but I think also the industry as a whole is they've had to build new lens lineups.
Well, like we were talking
the
about
ground
before,
up.
they have such great lens designs right now that it would be a shame to not throw away that R&D, but just have to redo it.
Yeah,
It'd be too expensive.
I think there's a lot of potential benefits to those curved sensors, but they're going to have to come way down in price. And again, you're going to be investing in some new lenses, or they'll actually have to put an spherical lens behind the lenses designed for the curved sensor to make them. It could be a real headache. To the best of my very limited knowledge. I wish Rishi was here, my buddy from DP Review. He could solve all of my head woes right now.
Things. Email question here from Jack. Good field audio is hard. Yes, it is.
That is true, Jack.
What do you recommend? We just had experience we were shooting minus 25, and our biggest issue was that our batteries kept dying. So we had those hot pockets.
Yep.
We're putting them on our mics to try to keep them alive. But then also, you got big jackets, stuff like that.
We actually did an episode on QP Review last year about a hand warmer, which might not seem like something.
The muff?
It looks like
Muff?
I don't know what they're called. The Russian put
It's
your
a
hands
muff.
through. It's called a muff.
I
it
think
turns
so.
out.
I'm questioning myself now.
No, don't. Yeah, you sounded very solid on that. But they actually had a little pouch for keeping your batteries in. And so you can use it for batteries, but also, just when you're not shooting, put your transmitters, receivers in there. But yeah, my major recommendations for location audio is get the microphone off the camera. You want it as close to your subject as possible. So, sometimes you might have a boom operator. That's happened to us, but it's extremely rare when we're out on location. So yeah, we live on wireless audio. And actually, on our channel, we've got a video with Alex Mitchell, a good friend of mine, who you'll be seeing on the channel very soon, going through all kinds of techniques for proper mic placement. And he really demonstrates that you can make a $50 microphone sound really good with proper technique, where if you use a $3,000 shotgun on camera at a distance, it can sound absolutely terrible. So yeah, we've been using, I really like the DJI. Their new wireless solution has been working really well for us. And then we just use Rode capsules with Rycoat, their company that make little stickies and things. We just generally
we use those too.
Generally put them under. If you're in the cold, like we're dealing with right now, you have to put the mic on the outside. Just any kind of really warm winter wear, especially when it gets cold, just makes a horrible, crispy, crackly.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is just is monitoring it, because it's so easy to, quickly bump it, or it gets like stuck in a fold of your jacket or something like that. So.
Yep. And a great technique if you're someone who, if you have someone with a hat presenting, is actually roll the audio cable back underneath their hat and put it above the brim here. It's actually a really nice place.
Oh, like a baseball cap.
Yeah, like a baseball cap. Just round the head, stick it there, and that works quite well. And then it's out of the wind a bit as well.
I don't wear baseball caps, so Drew, you're
You're gonna have to start wearing a baseball cap, or just like one of those big floppy hats. That'd be amazing
in the wintertime.
Yeah,
sounds like a great style. Okay, Kenneth, what video features would you like to see from manufacturers like Sony easily add in the near future? What are your wish list things for easy changes?
Quick fixes. I mean, I mentioned a couple of them in here. A few that I would like to see on top of that, I think every camera company should be putting waveforms in their camera. It's a way of, no, don't look at me like this. I know this is one of my pet things. Because when you're looking at a histogram, it tells you, look, you've got a lot of shadows that are very close to the bottom. Your highlights, you've got a few that are close to clipping, but it doesn't tell you where. So like if I've got a bright background, but my subject's still properly exposed, I can't really see that in a histogram very easily. So I would like to see it for video, but also no one talks about it would be a great tool for photography as well. Even we're starting to see some photo editors now, like the software will let you view your images as a waveform because it's a better tool. I think that's one of my pet issues. But then, yeah, things like controlling the focus speed. I think that needs to be made a whole lot easier in the future. So again, simple firmware update that would make things easier. On the photography side, I would love to see a way of properly exposing raw images. A lot of people don't know your histogram is referring to the JPEG your camera is creating with its current picture profile. It doesn't tell you where those shadows are 100% going to clip. So I know some people use like the video profiles, like HLG, HDR profiles and stuff. When they're shooting stills, you have to look at a gross gray image. I would love to see a way to meter stills the way that we do with video.
Yeah. And then just to flip that question, what are some of the things that you've seen in Sony cameras in particular that they've improved upon that we didn't see a few years ago that you're appreciating?
Well, the biggest, like right off the top, I mentioned autofocus, and I do think it is now fully usable in a lot of cameras, and I think Sony is currently the gold standard for that. That does make a big difference, but again, I'd like more quick access to it. I can't.
Headphone jacks on cameras has been a big one.
Yeah, and I've fought that battle for the longest time, and it seems crazy to me that so many of these cameras have Bluetooth functionality, but I can't use a generic Bluetooth microphone or especially Bluetooth headset. And just to be able to run an earbud as your audio monitoring source seems like a no-brainer to me. Again, I'm not a camera engineer, but it does seem really doable.
All right. I think that pretty much wraps up questions. I'm just double checking. There was some comments on here about how audio is so much easier than it's been in the old days. That was from Martin. I grew up using Nagra and Crystal Sync. Oh, yes, it's so much easier.
It's true when I do look at those little
spoiled.
DJI wireless microphones right now.
I was even
snap into the
thinking,
little case.
today we're using like our bigger, older packs, and like these days
brings me back,
right? Like we use like teeny tiny, like either DJI or Rode. We're using Rode for most of our episodes these days, and they're gonna throw me stuff. Just like, here's the gear. Yeah, okay, so this is the DJI set, and like, look how tiny compared to these. So much easier. Oh, Rode.
Yeah.
Oh, nice throw, Drew.
It's funny, I'm seeing like the timeline of my wireless systems laid out in front of me.
Yeah.
You don't have the deity.
That's cool. We're doing an episode actually on comparing audio, so you could check that out pretty soon here. That Dave and Drew did. They did lots of testing, both really good systems, but we're primarily using the Rode Wireless Go 2 set, and it's awesome. You can just plug it into the camera, you set it in the hot shoe, and then your talent can wear these, and you don't even have to plug a capsule into it. This can be your microphone.
Yeah,
which is super cool.
And they're surprised. I think it was actually our Sony A7 IV video where we got out in the field and discovered that our capsule was busted. And yeah, we recorded the whole thing with the built-in mic on the Rode Go, and it turned out quite nicely. And I just saw somebody mentioned when I talked about features that I want to see. Sony, we need shutter angle in your camera. We have a whole episode about why shutter angle is a wonderful thing. You can just leave it at 180
I didn't know
degrees.
this was going to be like Jordan's advice to
Jo-
Sony.
This is my soapbox show, and that's not what it was supposed to be at all.
No. But you've had a lot of really good tips, and I think everybody appreciates it.
I hope so. Shutter angle.
Shutter angles. Yes. Well, if there's a few more questions, we'll get to them. I just wanted to mention a few other little wrap-up points.
Yep.
Of course, thanks so much to the audience and everybody for tuning in tonight and commenting and participating. It's always great and interactive and fun to do that. Thanks to Jordan for hanging out with me.
Thanks
to
for
my
having
parents
me.
for babysitting our kids tonight so that we could
Huge.
do this. It was actually like a big deal. We didn't realize.
Yep.
Thanks to the TCSTV Live Dream team for always doing an awesome job with their live streams and keeping everything under control. And then thanks to Sony for, again, putting us together and making this happen and coming up with this idea. We think it's super fun. And if you've registered for this event, of course, Sony has that special offer. So watch out for that. And again, my email address is evelyn@thecamerastore.com. If you didn't register, if you're not sure, just send me an email and I'll make sure that you get on that list.
Does this count as a date? That's my question before we wrap up.
I'm not counting. I'm not counting this as a
The
date.
parents have the kids.
But, you
We're
know.
hanging out. It's grown-up conversation. I'm going to call this a date.
There we go. Yeah, well, anyways, thanks again for everything. And of course, if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'm all like messed up in my little outro here.
I'm gonna see if I can throw you off while
You
you're
have-
trying to
you
just
have
wrap
thrown
this
me
thing up
off
as
so
smoothly. So.
And yeah, thanks again to Chris Nichols and your partner, your other partner. Your
And
life
my, Chris Nichols and my other partner?
No, he's the
You mean
same.
you? Or no,
we're gonna
Chris
end the
is my
stream.
business partner, and this is my wife.
There we go. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, thanks TCSTV. We'll see you again very soon.
Miss you, TCS TV viewers. It's been fun.
Bye.